Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Newell, and we are starting our news reporters feature, extending it into the newsroom. Right there, you're looking at the daily item of Lynn Newsroom with Ryan Vermette and Anthony Camilleri from the item news staff. And gentlemen, welcome. Great to be seeing you and talking with you for the very first time here.
Nice to be here, Bill. Thanks for having us on the podcast. I appreciate it.
I see, and I got to move back a little. I'm too big here. That's what we got to. There we go. That's maybe a little bit better. Be better if I was even a little smaller here. So we want to talk about some of the news stories that are on the pages of the Daily Item in just a moment. But tell us a bit about yourselves. Ryan, how did you tell us your background and how you came to the item?
Yeah, sure. So I went to Springfield College. I graduated there in May 2021. I went for sports journalism and communications. Originally from Nashua, New Hampshire, and then moved to Linfield Wakefield border in March of last year now, I guess. And then just found my way to the item August 1st as my one of my first gigs in the career. So
nice. Anthony, how about yourself?
I got into journalism because I liked writing and I wanted a steady job primarily, but I graduated Emerson College for journalism. I started writing in high school for Performer magazine in Somerville. Then I went on to do some work in Westford for their community access television as a news reporter. And I just like the day-to-day. I like immersing myself in a community and listening to people, learning more about community's culture and about what's going on. It's like you get a college level course every day just reporting. I love it.
No, you're right. You never stop learning. And what about the pressure, though? There's got to be, I just want to follow up on that, to produce something or sometimes a couple of things every single day off of the keyboard, if you will. So tell me about that piece and finding stories.
Well, finding stories is pressure in that of itself sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah.
We joke that we're either sometimes in a drought or there's too much going on to handle. And yet it could be extremely stressful at times, but the payoff is when you read the paper or when somebody comments or writes in to just say, wow, that was so interesting. I wanted to learn about that. Or when you're talking to someone and they say, wow, nice story. That's an interesting concept. But yeah, no, it's an extremely stressful position. And there's some sleepless nights sometimes, it's probably part of the job.
Probably very stressful preparing for this interview, right? I mean, preparing for this hard-hitting interview that we're doing here today. No, maybe not.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to a couple of stories here. So one of the stories that I'm thinking gets a lot of hits on itemlive.com or a lot of eyes read it and talking about it because it's actually gone national is the Nahant Coyote story. Even the New York Times did a story on the Nahant Coyotes. I was away last week and one of my daughters said, hey, Dad, the New York Times ran a story on this thing here. So that's crazy, but go with that one with me, Ryan.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously been an ongoing saga. I mean, as someone living in Nahant, I'm sure you can attest that it's been going on for years and years, the coyote problem, on the North Shore. But, when I first started here, I had heard of some, attacks happening in Swampscott, little dogs being taken off leashes and stuff like that. So, it was a really interesting situation. But then, as we started covering it more, one of our reporters, actually, Sylvia Chen, she did a great story on when Mass Wildlife, the select board or board of selectmen decided to, allow the killing of coyotes and the hunting using sharpshooters. She did a great story on that. And then I just recently did a story on a number of people who went out to the beach to protest, the decision. So it just became a really interesting and bizarre scenario. I've never seen anything like it, which as a journalist, is always really, I don't want to say great, but as someone who's very curious, it's definitely a very, very curious situation. Being from New Hampshire, we've had, coyotes before, but I've never encountered anything like this. So it's just been a really interesting situation to cover. and to kind of hear both sides. As a journalist, you always want to have two sides to the story. So being able to hear both sides as to why it may or may not be the right way to go about things with the problem has been very, very interesting.
As you talk about it, you're talking about sharpshooters. That's the term they use to get coyotes. But it's not like they're riding around town in trucks on the back of a pickup truck looking for coyotes. They're luring them into what is the I guess the compost or recycling area in the town, and they built up this big dirt mound around it, whatever. So there's not really a chance of stray bullets going around either, I guess, from what I understand. It's more thought out than you think. I think people would have that question, hunting down coyotes, how it happens and how you do it, but they kind of are trying to lure them to a spot where they're very close to anyways, from what I understand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And now from what it sounds like to me, they're not going in there blindly. It's not going to become a war zone in the hunt, with the coyotes. But I believe hunting is scheduled to begin. I thought it was this month. So it'll be interesting to keep following that, and definitely keeping close on that for sure. So
you got it. So Anthony, you're working on a couple of stories, but tell me about this Facebook thing that story and the money they owe this company that owes the city of Lynn.
Yeah, that was a story that we came across, I believe, probably a month ago now, three or so weeks ago. And it all started because of traffic at the Lynn Nahant Rotary. I at first was kind of shrugging. I was busy. I was being a little bit stubborn about it. I didn't want to write a news story about traffic. It seemed part of a day-to-day routine, but we'd got enough calls complaining about the traffic that I figured I'd look into it. And I started just by calling the DPW. They said they weren't sure what was going on. It wasn't them. The Department of Water and Sewer called them, said, I have no idea. Then I talked to the Nahant side, and they weren't that sure either. They said, it's not us. So I was curious, and eventually through speaking with the mayor and through speaking with Antonio Barletta in Nahant, I was able to figure out that it was the Amiche fiber optic cable project. Apparently a venture led by Facebook is building a submarine cable, an underwater cable across the Atlantic Ocean into France, England, and all of Europe, essentially, for higher internet, all that. And what I found interesting was, after speaking with somebody, the chief financial officer in Lynn, Michael Bertino, we found out that they hadn't paid their taxes for maybe 4 or 5 years spread out over the last 20 years. And they owed the city of Lynn $2.75 million. For some reason, they cannot collect that money legally. So there's a weird loophole in the laws, but they've been negligent in their taxes for years. So I wrote the story because I found it was, and I do want to point out it's a Facebook-led venture, not Facebook themselves, to avoid a lawsuit. But, it's not every day that, I've gotten some emails, but it's not every day that a giant tech corporation gets involved in local news and in such a local story. So I found it very fascinating. And the idea of a submarine cable crossing the Atlantic in general, it seemed like science fiction to me.
Anthony, you described that story very well because, I buy that rotary all the time near the Lynn Swampscott area, that the Nahant Rotary, if you will. And that rotary, there's two things that you just mentioned that strike me as weird. In this day and age with satellites and Wi-Fi and all of that, I'm surprised they're laying a cable. That's one thought I had about the whole thing. But then the other thing, you're right, all this construction there, which went on for, I want to say, months. Everybody thought it was exactly what you said. It was a pipeline project, something like that. That they've had these pipeline issues with Nahant and the Linway and all these. It's always being dug up, as people know. But then it wasn't that, you know what I'm saying? It had nothing to do with that, with a roadway, a gas line, a sewer line, a water line. It wasn't any of those things. So you're right about how long that went on, and no one knew what it was about. It's crazy.
No, but it is crazy. And my thoughts were the same. Like, really, you need to, I'm not a technology person, so I'd sound foolish if I tried to explain to you as if I knew how this whole thing worked. I trust the people who put it in, but yeah, the underwater cable, I think it was over like 200 miles across the Atlantic, underwater, a fiber optic cable to enhance service from the US, from North America to Europe. I have no idea why, but I'd love to find out.
Why? Okay, so let me have you tell me about another story here, and that is, speaking of getting Boston attention. I know that it was on this animal hospital thing. Also got Boston TV attention, that was shut down very suddenly in Lynn. So tell me about that story and how that played out.
Well, it started with calls. Our receptionist, Lisa, came to my desk and she said, this lady that keeps calling. She's very upset. She says at North Shore Animal Hospital, people are going to get laid off. It's like a sudden closure. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas. And, we do get a lot of calls every day. And 80% of them we dismiss because they're nonsense. People get angry about any little thing and they decide to call the newspaper. They think it's going to be Watergate, right? But, it was email after email after email from owners, pet owners on the North Shore saying this is uncool, this is unfair, So I show up and I try to schedule an interview with Dr. Peter Dunn. And the receptionist there just says, you have to talk to corporate. She gives me a business card and moves me away. I left my number, my name and everything. And I leave. I'm like, all right, well, if I can't reach them, if they don't want to talk, there's only so much I can do. And then I get an email from Dr. Peter Dunn, who was part of the Dunn family, who had founded and worked at this animal hospital for 40 years. It was a staple of the community. Anybody who had a dog or a pet went to North Shore Animal Hospital in the region. And he emailed me and said, something along the lines of, I'm sorry, corporate shoved you away. I heard you came by the clinic. I'd love to talk to you. Come by tomorrow. And if you have trouble getting in, just let me know. I'll come and get you. And we went. Essentially what had happened was the owner was approaching his 70s. He was looking to retire. And this business that he built bottom up, he bought the land, had the place built himself, and then worked there with his son, who was also a vet. It was the American dream. He wanted to retire. He sold it to a corporation, Mission Veterinary Hospitals. And, I have to be careful about how I phrase it because there's opinion that goes on here. But within 6 months, the place went from being at its best financial year, according to the business, to shutting down. And according to the former owners, it was essentially due to poor management, to the fact that they laid off all of the original staff despite promises that they wouldn't. And according to the corporation, it was because the business was awful anyway and they sold it. They blamed everything. There was a leak in the basement, a sewage leak, this and that. So, what actually happened and why this thriving business closed after 6 months after they sold it out, it's not my place to say, but just going in there, I saw everyone was crying. There were customers, clients who came there with their dogs and they all just looked so distressed. And it was a powerful story to me because it's this nice little pocket of community in a business. And for whatever reason, why it closed down, it's a sad thing to see.
Yeah, and it speaks to the power of a reporter being on the scene and being able to eyeball these kinds of things and have the ears to listen and see what is actually going on. Because you're right, it seems is it a real story? Is it a big story? You like you said, you get these phone calls all the time, and sometimes it's hard to figure that out. You know what I mean? But you're right. I mean, it turns out, and I read your story, and like the sewage leak thing. I'm glad you mentioned that too. It doesn't seem like that would close a business, but you know, who am I to? I can say that, I can question it, but whatever. But you're right. It's a strange story, and you're right. And I hadn't really thought of it in those terms as being an emotional piece until you just mentioned it right now. To be quite honest with you, you know what I mean. But you're right.
Oh.
Anything? I want to ask you guys about stuff coming up, because before we started this, we did talk about this, and I was made note watching Jared Nicholson of Lynn, his Twitter this week mentioning 1 year in office. And I really think he's kind of been very transformative in a way in his style and approach to running the city of Lynn. A lot of different things have happened in Lynn. You know, I think Mayor McGee probably did a great job as well, but he's doing it a little bit differently. A lot of outreach, a lot of communications, social media, all of that stuff. And he's got some big issues he's been dealing with. But the item also picked up on this as well, or is going to. You are running some features next week on Mayor Nicholson's 1 year in office, right?
Yes, starting Monday, I encourage our readers to open their paper, and we did an hour-long editorial interview with him. The entire item editorial board was in this conference room with Mayor Nicholson and a few members of his administration. And we essentially just discussed a year in review and the steps that he'll take in 2023, some wider, more broad goals for the new year. So we're going to break that into maybe a 4 or 5 part series over the next week. I encourage our readers to look into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, definitely something to check out. Gentlemen, anything else you want to share with us here? As we talk late in the week here, Friday, is a couple of snowflakes in the air. I noticed driving through Lynn out in the today, but we still haven't. You still haven't done that snow story yet, right? That'll be coming up pretty soon, I guess, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, that'll be coming up soon. And we haven't had to yet. We had that weird nor'easter a couple of weeks ago, but I always joke around, the longer we go without a big snowstorm, I just say, the months of February and March are going to be tough ones as the snowstorms get pushed back and back. So, we'll see, but it's definitely coming for sure. Be on the lookout for a couple of our snowstorm stories for sure.
I know. I was saying that like it was like 5 or 6 years ago, one of those winters where we're like 2 weeks from now, like the third week in January, and it's like 40 degrees and 50 degrees and nothing. And then we got slammed. You know what I mean? We got slammed for the last week of January. Yeah, it'll probably come. Well, gentlemen, Ryan, Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we will hope to check back with you very soon in the weeks ahead.
I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you for having us on. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bill.
Thank you.